Hey everybody, Alex here, the creator of Politics and War, and in a recent interview last week, I talked about one of the ideas I had for adding content to gameplay that I think will have a lot of positive effects in a lot of different ways, and that is a new feature called military experience. And I just finished kind of compiling a document where I've kind of written down all of the thoughts that I had in my head on this topic, and I wanted to create this video to pitch it in a fun video format. I'll post this document as well, but just as part of an effort I'd like to make to make more video content and such for the game. So let's get started. What is military XP or experience? Basically, my thought here is that we'll add this new feature, and essentially what it's going to represent is, the experience that your units get in battle. And specifically, we're just going to be talking about soldiers, tanks, aircraft, and ships. We're not going to be including spies, missiles, or nuclear weapons in this, just the conventional war units. And basically, for each battle that gets conducted, military units will get 1 XP. So you do a ground battle, you send 10,000 soldiers and 5,000 tanks. Then you have 10,000 XP for your soldiers and 5,000 XP for your tanks, and so on. And so what this will do is how military XP will actually benefit you is it will impact the roles that are conducted in these battle types. So in case you're not familiar, ground battles, airstrikes, and naval battles all essentially consist of 3 roles that are done, where a combat value is compiled. For ground battles, it's a composite of soldiers and tanks. Airstrikes are just aircraft. Naval battles are ships. And essentially, you and your opponent roll a value between 40% and 100%, essentially of the number of units that you've sent into battle. And so that creates a lot of variability, and that's actually where the outcome types come from. For example, if you roll higher than your opponent in all 3 rolls, that is an immense triumph. If you roll higher than your opponent in 2 out of 3 rolls, it's moderate success. For 1 out of 3 rolls, that's a Pyrrhic victory. And if you don't win any of the rolls, that's an utter failure. So that's how those outcome types are determined. And then casualties and some damages are also calculated off of these rolls. So if you're wondering where the random variability comes from in any given attack where you're destroying some infrastructure or killing some enemy units, those also come from what these roll values are. So your casualties get determined in part by what your opponent rolled. So if they roll higher numbers, then you'll take more casualties and vice versa. So that's always been a part of Politics and War, and it's always been between 40% and 100%. That's never been modified or changed in any way. So how military XP will affect things is it will just adjust that lower range. So by default, assuming we introduce this today and everybody started with 0 experience, everything would work exactly the same as it does now and always has, where you'd be rolling between 40% and 100%. With the military XP, you would be able to increase that lower end from 40% up to 50% and somewhere in between based on the amount of military XP that you have. So that's where the benefit comes in. What that does, like I said, is it would increase your opponent's casualties, it would increase your likelihood of success in any given battle, and it would... what was I going to say? What was the other thing that it's going to do? I guess it also decreases the variability. So, that's a common question that I get and the game staff gets a lot is, hey, I had 20% more aircraft than my opponent, but I still got, a Pyrrhic victory. How is that possible? And it's because of that random variability in these rolls. So if you are decreasing that range between 40% and 100% to 50% and 100%, or 45% or 42% or whatever it is, that will decrease the variability and you'll more consistently win battles versus how it is now if you have more military XP. So that's where the benefit and the incentive to actually use this comes into play. And then so I've got this section here. How does it work? So basically you've got a total XP for each unit. So let's say you have, well, I've got an example in here that we'll get to, but you've got a total XP and then you'll essentially have an average XP, which is your total XP divided by the number of units. And really what matters is that average XP. So with that average XP, we'll plug that into this formula here, this 10 times 1 minus e to the power of negative x over 50. And that generates a graph that looks like this. And I'll pull over this actual, here's where I've got it in Desmos, and you can see it a little bit bigger. But basically, if I turn this off for a second, you can see that this is a curve that starts out increasing quickly, and then as you get closer to 10%, it trails off. So there's no limit on how much XP you can have. You can have up to infinity XP, but as it goes out, it just basically approaches 10 and never really increases beyond that. Well, it never will increase beyond 10. So it's really in the beginning, the initial bits of XP are going to add a lot. For example, here's around 5 XP would be about a 1% modifier, so then you're rolling between 41% and 100%. As you get up here towards about 12 XP, average XP, you're getting a 2% modifier, so between 42% and 100%, all the way up to right around 180, you get to about 9.7, pretty close to 10 there, and it just keeps increasing. So always incentive to gain more XP, but effectively there's a soft cap on how much of a benefit you can get. And since you're getting 1 XP per battle, 180 battles is a lot. I'm not saying it's not doable, but will take a while to achieve. So that's the kind of the math behind how this is going to work. And here I wrote out that around 35 average XP, you're getting a 5% modifier, and around 180 for close to the full 10%. So what happens when you buy additional units? So additional units are going to come in with no XP. So I've got an example here where we have, a nation has 10,000 soldiers and 200,000 XP for those soldiers. So they're averaging 20 XP per soldier. So they're getting, I don't know off the top of my head, maybe 3% modifier bonus, something like that. Or actually I wrote it here, 3.3% roughly. So if you buy another 5,000 soldiers, those soldiers come in with 0 XP. So now you've got 15,000 soldiers, but you still have the same 200,000 XP. And that averages down to roughly 13 XP per soldier. So at that level, your modifier is only 2.34%. So you lose about 1% modifier, and of course, the amount that you're going to lose is going to vary based on the number of units you're buying, your amount of XP, and where you are along that curve. So if you already have a ton of XP, it's going to be reduced less than when you have very little, essentially. So that's the idea. So as you buy new units, you're essentially diluting your experience. And you can think of this as, you have in this example, 10,000 seasoned veterans. They're really good at wars, and you bring in 5,000 new troops. Those new troops aren't going to fight as well as the seasoned veterans, and so your average XP goes down and your modifier goes down. So what happens when your units die or you sell them or decommission them? Basically, you lose the XP that they had. So basically the same example here, 10,000 soldiers, 200,000 XP, 20 XP per soldier. You sell 2,000 of those, or you discharge 2,000 soldiers. What happens is you lose the average XP that they had. So each one averaged 20 XP. So you're also losing 40 military XP for your soldiers, and you're going down to, now you have 8,000 soldiers and 160,000 military XP. But you're maintaining your 20 XP per soldier, so your modifier isn't changing at all, your benefit in wars. But the idea here is that it's going to discourage a little bit selling your units and then buying new ones when you're ready to go to war again, because those new units won't be trained as well as your old ones were. So this will incentivize players to keep more units on hand, which is good in that it's going to increase demand for money and resources essentially in the game, and help combat some of the inflation in the economy that we've had. We'll get into some of the other incentives here too, but that's how that part of it will work. And same thing applies if units die in battle. So for the war incentive, this part I stuck in here. Essentially what this mechanic does is it encourages people to declare more wars even in peacetime. So you can think of raiding, for example. Raiders are going to have an advantage. They're going to be accruing a lot of XP, and so their units are going to fight better because they're using them more often. So there's going to be a reward to that, and that will encourage more activity in terms of wars going on, during kind of those peacetime periods between alliance wars, which I think will be good for activity, good for demand on money and resources in the game to help combat that inflation again. And then the next thing here is a new mechanic called military training. So I get that not everybody is going to be declaring wars all the time. Some large nations won't even have people that they can declare war on necessarily. And so military training will be a way that you can increase the XP for your units without actually fighting battles. And they'll work basically just like a battle, except no casualties or anything. But you'll send in however many units you want. You'll click the button for the military training, and what it's going to do is just produce 1 XP for all of those units that you sent in. Now there will be a cost to this, and that'll be the same cost that you would have in a battle. So I'm not remembering the amounts right off the top of my head, but whatever amount of munitions and gasoline that you would use for sending soldiers and tanks into a ground battle, you'd spend the same amount on training. So there's a cost to the training, and obviously it's up to each player to decide if they want to, accrue the XP and if it's worth it or not. But the idea being that this will again create or increase demand for money and resources, as well as make this another incentive to get online and be active every day. So to log into your nation and do something, because you'll be limited to only doing one training per day, also with a 6-hour cooldown period. So what that'll do is that'll stop people from doing it like right before update and right after update. You'll kind of have to get on and do it once per day. And then we'll also stick a captcha on there to make sure that people aren't just botting that and abusing it. But that's the idea there. New mechanic, new reason to log in every day, train your units, build up their XP. And then with that, we'll add a couple new national projects. One will be the military exercise zone. And so what this will do is it'll let you train your units up to 2 times per day, but you'll still have that 6-hour cooldown period. So, you can log on in the morning and train your units, and then you can train them one more time that day, but you have to wait at least 6 hours. So you can come back in the afternoon or evening and train them again. So that'll double the activity incentive to, get online twice a day if you're really trying to boost your military XP through training. And then another national project, the Advanced Training Protocol. Essentially what this does when you build new units, instead of starting out with 0 XP, this will allow them to start out with 5 XP. So not a huge boost, but something that would be beneficial for probably any nation that anticipates being involved in any alliance war or anything like that. It'll just give you a little bit of a boost, about a 1% boost there on the lower end of the modifier in battles. And then we'll introduce, I'm thinking, this isn't set in stone, but I'm thinking a new credit usage option, which would be redeem a credit for some military XP. So the way that I've got it laid out right now is that you could do 5 military XP for all of your units in exchange for 1 credit. And essentially, that's part of the competitive usage of credits, so it would be included in that 20 credit per month limit of usage. So that caps it. I get that it's a competitive advantage, and we don't want people who are spending the most money to be the best at the game or have the best chances at winning. And so that's why it would be capped. But on the other hand, this is another thing that would have good incentive to use credits for, especially if you're, thrust into a big war that you didn't anticipate and you're kind of caught with your pants down, your units aren't trained very well. You could spend some credits to catch up a little bit. And so you'd be capped again at 20 credits per month, so that caps you to 100 military XP, which is only about halfway on this graph. I mean, that would get you about 8.5% towards the modifier. But again, you can only do that once per month. As units die and things, and you build new units, that's going to be reduced. So it would be advantageous, and this part isn't finalized, and the whole thing isn't finalized. I mean, we're going to get feedback on all of this, but this is just what I'm pitching here to start with. So another way that we can help support the game financially through increasing demand for credits, encouraging players to buy credits, and especially larger nations that really don't have any reason to buy credits, for a cash reward or resource reward in the game because they produce so much. This is something that would be beneficial or incentivized for them to actually want to buy credits and support the game with. So that's the other factor there. And just to rehash, this whole thing, if implemented tomorrow, wouldn't immediately have an effect. It would take a while for people to build up XP and things. And you're not really, you are more likely to win battles if you have the higher XP, but it's just because of reducing the variance of your roles. It's not like it makes your units stronger necessarily, or really changes the, it's not like somebody with a ton of military XP can now always crush somebody who has the same amount of units as they do and no military XP. It just increases the likelihood that you'll win these individual roles, which over time will accumulate to, more favorable results. But proposing this at a cap of a plus 10% modifier isn't like a huge, I don't think, would be a huge game imbalancing, update or anything like that. Of course, this is the first step in the process, getting it all written down, laying out the idea, creating this video so you guys can watch it and give your feedback and stuff, and we'll work out the details from there. But I don't think that this would be a crazy change to war gameplay as is. It would just be kind of a fun new mechanic, and like I said, have all these incentives to be more active, use a little bit more resources, and add a little bit of strategy to what you're doing instead of just buying a bunch of units, maxing out your units when you're ready to go to war, and then selling them all at peacetime. You have some incentive to keep some units around if they have lots of XP and to train those units and log in every day and stuff like that. So I'm excited to share this with you guys and to hear your feedback and suggestions. And that's pretty much it. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and hear me explain this new idea.